Coming home. When I think back to the time when I was a small child, I remember just a little about my heritage. I knew I was Native American, and we went to Chief Seattle Days a few times, but nobody really took the time to teach me about the important things I needed to know surrounding the history of my people. I was an off-reservation Indian and would grow up that way for the biggest part of my life. It was 1980, and I found myself with two small girls on the East Coast now in a small town called Willow Grove, Pennsylvania. My brother was stationed in the military there. While I was there, I met and married a Marine sergeant whose father was a retired Army colonel, but more importantly, he was also a retired history teacher who had taught my husband a wealth of knowledge which he would share with my girls and me. It would be during a trip to Maine that we would get our first experience of these great history lessons while visiting his parents. Nick took my girls and I out to a point on the water and showed us where the battle occurred between the Indians and the invaders, explaining where each side was, how the enemy came in. Step by step, he explained to us how it all happened. I remember a time while living in Pennsylvania that we took a trip to the fields where the Civil Wars took place and walked through, and as we did, Nick did the same here, explained all about the Civil War to my girls and I as we walked through the fields, touching the cannons and looking at everything. My most memorable experience is when we moved to North Carolina. We moved to a small town in the mountains called Burning Town Gap. Located just outside of Franklin, North Carolina, it's a beautiful little place sitting in perhaps a valley preceding the mountain. It's hills and valleys out there. We were located in the mountain region. One day, my husband took me for a ride, and we went on a fairly untraveled road up and over this mountain. We traveled and traveled for a long time. I got a bit scared at times, as the road was steep off to one side and not well traveled. It took us the better part of 2.5 hours to travel the road. At the end of the road, I got out of the Jeep, and as there was a monument there. As I read what was written, I began to cry as the story told of the many Cherokee men, women, and children who had walked the Trail of Tears we had just come across, and I cried for the many who had died on that Trail of Tears. I would later find out there were many more trails of tears. I returned home shortly after that experience. I felt the need to return to my people and to learn my own culture and heritage. I admit I didn't get right back into school when I got home. I learned how to be a clam digger, a tribal fisherwoman, shrimper, crabber, gooey duck diver, had and raised 2 more children, and then decided I needed to continue my education. It would be at Northwest Indian College that I would learn about my ancestral heritage. I started taking classes, and my first quarter I took American Indian education and found out a lot of things about Native American people that somebody growing up off the reservation would understandably know nothing about. Hurt and confused, I tried talking to my mother about things, and she ignored me as if I had not spoken. I gave up trying to talk to her, but was so interested in my native classes I took every one I could. I got sick and had to quit school for a while, then come back, but knowing all the things that I can do, I think I have inherited my gifts from my grandma. She passed away when I was 6. After learning more about her in my history class, I find I have a lot in common with her. I already knew she could bake, sew, and make jam. I do all those things, and gardening, I do that too. But she was a basket weaver and a moccasin maker. Well, me too. My grandmother lives on through me and through mine, all the way down to my granddaughter Grace. So I continue my education. I cannot seem to get enough knowledge, not just about my own people, but also about all of our people and all my relations. For a recent class, I was able to interview my Auntie Betty, who told me that 2 of her sisters, my mom and Auntie Rosemary, had gone to a Catholic boarding school as small girls, and my mom had stopped eating and sleeping there and my grandmother had to bring her home. They were very small girls at the time. I am very interested in our song and dance, so am in my second class, have made 4 drums now, and will enter my continuing language class in the spring, and continue to teach my daughter and granddaughter. I feel like I am now on the path my Creator intended me to be.